All right, we get to tie at the time to talk Washington Commanders football here on the Ourlads Football Network and the Ourlads Football YouTube Channel. And that means we get a chance to talk to David Harrison once again. And David, who has been on this network before, covering Tampa Bay for a couple of years. We had him on during this offseason, though, to talk Washington Commanders football, which is the switch he has recently made. And, of course, David also has a daily podcast called the Commanders Podcast, part of the Locked On network, the Locked On Commanders Podcast. You can check that out daily. How's it going, David?
Oh, it's going good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's this is it. This is the fun time of year. It's the busy time of year. This is what we all look forward to every year if you're a football fan. So I can imagine Washington Commanders fans, they've had so much to work through mentally over the years. I just can't imagine what they're going through. I know what I'm going through as a Jet fan, but what they're going through is even worse. And yet they've got themselves finally some direction with a new owner, a new GM, a new head coach, and most of all, a new shiny toy at quarterback. I can't imagine what the fan base is going through right now.
A lot of excitement. It kind of ebbs and flows, actually, because, when a player is traded, some people get upset and some people get excited. And then some people want another trade to happen and some people get excited that it might happen. Some people are upset that it didn't happen. And then, of course, like whenever a player gets signed to a position group that somebody didn't want them to get signed to. So there's a lot of emotion going on in the Washington Commanders atmosphere. But I think ultimately it's all rooted in the fact that people are starting to see some potential in this team for once. And it's real potential. It feels like real potential versus, hopeful potential, which is what they were dealing with before. So I think, when you feel that real kind of potential in your grasp, you want it to be maximized as quickly as possible. I think that's where some of the, I don't want to call it negative because it's not really negative, but it's like some of this desire for things to happen that aren't happening comes from.
Yeah, it's what happened when you care about something as opposed to, screw that. I'm not emotionally attached. So it makes a lot of sense. You just talked about trades. So yes, a lot of people were caught off guard by this deal. I think part of it had to do with the fact that it was made in the division. So what fan base, 50-50, which side of the fence did they go to with this trade?
I think initially, pretty much everybody was very unhappy that Jahan Dotson was traded to the Philadelphia Eagles. I think once that initial kind of stunning detail, was washed over and people had time to kind of digest that, I think now people are kind of happy to see this team take a stance with saying, look, we're looking for this kind of a player, and this is the type of system we're trying to install. And if you're not going to fit, whether it's from a personality standpoint or a schematic standpoint, we're just not going to waste our time in trying to force, a square peg into a round hole, because for years, that's what this team had done previously. And to be honest, this team currently is still dealing with some of those misshaped pegs that this staff is now trying to make fit into certain spots. But, with Jahan, it very kind of quickly got to a point where the staff just came to the realization, like, look, we're not a fit. There doesn't have to be a bad guy necessarily. And, we'll see what Jahan says when he does his first media with the Philadelphia Eagles, because obviously they're going to ask him about his time in Washington. They're going to be hoping that he says something derogatory, and who knows, he may very well. But the vibe over here isn't a F him or get him out of here or he's trash or he's garbage. No, it's just we didn't fit, and because we didn't fit, we're going to go get something that does fit what we're trying to do and put you somewhere where maybe you could fit better, and that's Philadelphia Eagles. And then for the Commanders, they get draft capital in the form of a third-round pick, give up the fifth-round pick, but also get the 2 7s. And now they can go through and, whether they package those picks later on or, there's people who want them to package them now for another player or whatever they decide to do with them. The bottom line is that they can go pursue with those picks, whether it's via trade or via draft, players that do fit what they're trying to accomplish. And when you look at the rookie class they brought in this year, so far, it looks like they know what they want. They know what they want, and they're doing a good job of identifying players that give it to them.
Okay, so why do you think Dotson did not fit?
There's a multitude of reasons. One of those reasons is it's a very fast-paced offense, right? So we need when you look at the Washington Commanders offense, you're talking about players that need to be able to get off the line of scrimmage very, very quickly. Jahan Dotson has a false step in his release. He's had it since Penn State. It's never gone away. And for most receivers, quite honestly, once you get to this level, if you have a false step, you just have a false step. There's that, and then there's also the fact that he doesn't get off press very easily. It does take him some time from time to time to get off press. He doesn't respond well to contact. And, the more this becomes a passing league, the more defenses become physically aggressive at the point of attack or at the line of scrimmage, trying to delay passes. And Jaden Daniels is a very in-rhythm quarterback, which is what you want out of your rookie, right? He likes to make decisions in a timely fashion. So if he gets to the top of his drop and you're not into your break, you're not getting the ball. Like, that's just pretty much how this is going to go. He's not going to wait for you to say, well, maybe once he does get to his break, he'll come clean and do all these things. Jaden is very intent on trying to get to where he wants to go with the ball as quickly as possible. And part of that is his pre-snap reads. He likes to come out and say, okay, I want to hit this route, so I'm going to try to set it up with this motion, or I'm going to try to set it up by freezing this safety with my eyes, or whatever it is. And in order to do that, he's got to trust that you're going to be where you're going to be. So the slower you get off the line of scrimmage, the more you get held up in your release and in your stem, the harder it is for him to trust that you're going to be there for him to put the ball on you. So all of those things just basically pull against each other. And I think that's ultimately why he doesn't fit in Washington.
And speaking about another potential deal, which is all the rave, and I know a couple of organizations are dealing with this rumor-wise, and one of those teams is Washington with Ayuk. So do you think that this has a lot, the Adam Peters connection, is that really what's driving the rumors? Or is it something else, regarding fit? What is it?
I think the Jaden Daniels connection is what drives the rumors. Jaden and Brandon go back to their Arizona State days. They're best friends to this day from meeting on the Arizona State football squad. But then, the Adam Peters connection to San Francisco, I think, just pours gasoline onto that fire that's been lit by the Sun Devil connection there between those two players. And then you have obviously the social media stuff where Jaden is on the FaceTime call with Brandon, and Brandon's got the photo, the still frame of Commanders practice tape. So there's just been a lot of Washington connection because of that friendship. Now, from a fit standpoint, there has been a lot of question of does he really do anything different than what Terry McLaurin does? And the answer I would give to that is not necessarily, but he does it better, right? Like, Brandon Ayuk is a better receiver in the NFL than Terry McLaurin is. That's not even a disrespect to Terry McLaurin. That's just a sign of how good Brandon Ayuk is. And there's nothing wrong with having two guys that can do that type of stuff on each side of the field. That's never going to be a negative. I know, from a roster standpoint, a lot of people would love to have a burner over here and a really tall, decent speed guy over here so that you can attack defenses in a multitude of ways. But there's something to be said by having two guys who are just very good route runners, very good technicians that have underrated speed and great hands. You're never going to lose games because you have two of those guys. So I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, where it doesn't fit is that Adam Peters has been very clear that they want to build this team through the draft. They want to be very conservative in the contracts that they do dole out, which is why you see a ton of one-year contracts this year. And even the multi-year contracts they did sign with guys like Tyler Biadasz and Frankie Louvu, they're rather modest 3-year deals that, honestly, this team, if they really need to get out of that deal, they can get out of that deal. And you see they didn't re-sign a lot of players. They're not re-signing, offensive lineman Sam Cosme's contract is up at the end of this year. A lot of people are like, what are you waiting for? Re-sign this dude? Well, this staff has not known Sam Cosme for his entire career. They're just getting to know him now, and they're going to make him, at least we anticipate, they're going to make him play this season and kind of show that he is worth keeping around for the long haul before they re-sign him this offseason. And we all hope that that's, the eventual outcome here. But so to go trade for a guy like Brandon Ayuk, obviously you're going to give up draft capital. And, the rumors are that Pittsburgh was offering a second and San Francisco was going to take that. So, it's not a ton of draft capital, relatively speaking, but then you're also going to have to pay him at least top 3 money. Rumors are that he wants top money for a wide receiver. So you're going to have to pay him that money. And, while they do have the cap space, that's the exact kind of deal that Adam Peters has been trying to resist making in his first year as a GM. And I think that's the reason why ultimately that deal doesn't get done. It's a never say never NFL. And certainly, things can change on a dime. And if the 49ers come through and say, hey, man, the Steelers lowered their draft offer to a 3rd rounder, you give us a 3rd rounder and he's yours, maybe Adam is like, okay, now I can do this. And he becomes a Commander. But for right now, just based off of what's already been said, what's already been demonstrated. It just doesn't seem like it's fitting the Adam Peters model of building this team. Again, tendency breakers happen all the time. So,
Sure.
don't hold your breath saying it's not going to happen, but the cards just don't seem to be in place.
Yeah, and Kyle Madsen, our insider for the Niners Wire, actually, we talked about this around draft time, and he said that don't believe any of the rumors you're going to hear about Brandon Ayuk. He's going nowhere. I'm telling you right now. And he still said the same thing when I asked him a couple of weeks ago, and I'll talk to him and interview him next week. But I think that, like you just said, and the reason he said that is because the Niners have been through this before. This is like their MO. This is how they handle their players, but they always wind up signing them and they don't trade them. But I think you made great points where I guess, though, if there was a time that a guy was going to be let go from that situation, what they were going to trade, there's so many connections here that this would be the likely time it would happen. So that's what I think is interesting about that. But you're right. It probably won't. But it is still something that is, at least it's plausible. So we'll see what happens. Okay, so let's take well, first of all, how is he handling himself? I've been a huge fan of his, talking about him on this network for about, I don't know, like 10 months, about how much I love the kid and thought he was the best quarterback. Matter of fact, all the top guys, all the top scouts at Ourlads believe he's the top quarterback prospect over Williams. And I actually said this a couple of months ago that I thought that wherever he lands, I think he has the best opportunity to do what CJ Stroud did. If he's got the team around him, of course. And that is to come out right out of the gates and surprise people by actually looking like he's not a rookie quarterback. So how is he looking anything like that? Is he looking like, I think he might have himself a pretty good rookie season.
I mean, he definitely looks positive, right? And he looks like a guy who's comfortable in his skin, comfortable with the role that he's being asked to play. And I think that's really a big part of it. And, I can't speak too deeply into the Houston Texans mentality, but I know when you look at the Houston Texans roster from last year, you don't really look at that team and say, man, CJ Stroud really drove that team. You say he played really well. He executed very well, did very well as a rookie quarterback. But I think when you look at that team, honestly, you kind of look at it and you say, like, DeMeco Ryans really drove that team, right? And, like, that was the personality maker, and that was the pace setter for that team. On this team, Dan Quinn is certainly setting the pace with the personality, but there's leaders like Zach Ertz. Terry McLaurin is taking a more vocal role in the locker room and in the huddle with the team. Bobby Wagner on the other side of the ball. And the great thing about the way that Dan Quinn is doing this is we say that side of the ball, this side of the ball, but ultimately they're all mixed in. Like the locker room, we haven't seen it yet, but the guys have been telling us, like, you've got, Terry McLaurin. I think the guy next to him in his locker is Emmanuel Forbes. It's not another wide receiver. It's actually a cornerback. Like, guys are intermingled and they're mixed up. So, there's not this division of defense and offense, special teams. Everybody's mixed in together in the locker room. And I think that's really a great way to unify the team. So when you look at Jaden, he's not expected to be, the general up in front of the formation, making sure that everybody's in line. All they're asking him to do this year is be the best quarterback you can do. And with everything that a rookie quarterback has on their plate, learning the playbook, the checks, impressing their teammates, the pressure, right? Like make no mistake about it. I know LSU, Ohio State, those are big time college football programs. Sure. The pressure in the NFL is 100 times bigger than it is in college football. So, that's a lot for anybody to take on. So being able to also be the leader of the team off the table for him, at least for his rookie season, I think is massive. Eventually Jayden Daniels will have to prove that he's a leader because he's a quarterback. Quarterbacks just by nature are leaders. But in your rookie season, this organization, and I think the Houston Texans did this by and large, allowed their rookie quarterback to just focus on being a rookie quarterback. The rest of the stuff, we've got other guys that are going to take care of that. And I think that's a huge benefit. And I think that's a reason that perhaps Jaden could be, that next CJ Stroud type of rookie quarterback. Because you look at like Chicago, and I mean, Caleb Williams, like, I don't know if you watched Hard Knocks, but it's basically Hard Knocks Caleb Williams featuring the Chicago Bears. Like, what I mean? Like the Caleb Williams docudrama versus a Chicago Bears docuseries. Like, and that's such a different dynamic. Like the weight of the world is on Caleb Williams, while as with Jayden Daniels, the weight of the world is not on him. Now, as well as I do, once the games start playing, like if this defense gives up 35 points a game, the weight of the world is going to land on Jayden Daniels' shoulders because he's going to have to throw the ball 30 to 40 times a day. And that's going to be problematic for any rookie quarterback, I think. So, we'll see how it goes. But right now in the early going, That's why he's able to look so comfortable. That's also why he's able to effectively operate the offense so well. I mean, he's only thrown 3 interceptions all of training camp. 2 of them are not his fault, like blatantly receivers dropping the ball into the hands of defenders or what have you. So, I mean, really, if you want to, play the which one is he actually accountable for, the dude's thrown 1 interception in 11-on-11 drills all training camp, and he's thrown no interceptions in the preseason. That is something that most veteran quarterbacks don't do. You know what I mean? So
yeah, sure.
That's very impressive.
How is so Mariota is the veteran backup?
Yeah.
That relationship going really well?
Yeah, I mean it's going well. I think the great thing about Marcus Mariota this time around as a backup, I think back in Philadelphia probably too. Like I think he went to Philly understanding your Jalen Hurts' backup, because in Atlanta, like he was at least told like, hey, you could be the guy. But then once he got there, I think we all kind of understood it was basically just like, we're waiting on the opportunity to put Desmond Ridder in there and replace you. I don't think that's a healthy environment for any quarterback. But going to Philly, now coming to Washington, he understands his role. And the first time we talked to him after he signed, he basically kind of said, if I'm asked to be a mentor, I'm going to do it. Like gave us a nice long dialogue on how he's going to be a great mentor. And then he goes, if I'm asked to play, I'll be ready to do that too. So very clearly he understands that his focus here is being a mentor to Jaden Daniels. And he's been great. You know what I mean? And Jaden has talked about how great he is, helping him prepare, helping him study, do all those things. But not just Marcus, but like the entire quarterback room has really been just a big, fraternity of quarterbacks. And Jeff Driscoll, who's not as much of a veteran as Marcus Mariota, but you'll see him and Jaden interacting. Sam Hartman is an undrafted rookie, and he's been helpful to Jaden because he's kind of like that buddy in the clubhouse, like, hey, we're the freshmen together, and kind of keeps things loose and keeps the trash talk going so that, nothing ever gets too big or nothing ever becomes too serious, right? Because at the end of the day, this is still a game. So I think the quarterback room just in general, it just really balances out very well to where you got guys who all want to compete, but they all understand at the top of the totem pole, there's one dude that everybody's expecting to be the king of this room. And while we're all out here trying to get better ourselves, I mean, Jeff Driscoll deserves a lot of credit. That dude has grown just in this training camp alone, at least for what he's been able to do since he's been here. But they all understand that all of this is centered around Jaden being the most successful he can be, and that's where they're all kind of finding their roles.
Has Hartman, who had put up just tremendous numbers a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of expectations last year at Notre Dame. They didn't go as well as anywhere near as well as he would have liked. He doesn't end up getting drafted, but he has so much experience, and that's the thing that all you have to do is take a look at Brock Purdy as an example, as 7th round pick, but all the experience in the world, and those experienced quarterbacks. Those are the ones that seem to pick things up a lot quicker. Big surprise in the NFL. So is it possible? Because I don't know if Hartman ends up on the practice squad, I can't imagine he's going to stay there. Maybe he will. I don't know. But is there any chance that Hartman makes the team and Jeff Driscoll is the odd man out?
So Sam Hartman is expected to go to the practice squad at this point in time. Never say never again. Sam has looked really good in practice, and he's done a lot of great things for himself. But when you got to that preseason game against the New York Jets, I think you kind of saw the rookie come out. Like the game is faster, the game is more aggressive, and I think that's kind of what you expect to see out of a rookie quarterback in his first NFL action. You kind of saw it out of Sam, where things got a little bit shaky. Now he got multiple drives before he actually ended up getting injured and wasn't able to play in the Dolphins game. He actually just returned to practice this week to finish out training camp, and we think he's going to go against the New England Patriots to end the preseason. So that'll be good to see him get back out there, because once he got a few snaps under him and once he got off the field and back on the field, like he definitely got his legs under him a little bit more. So it'll be really interesting to see. Hopefully he can go against the New England Patriots to see another set of plays from him in that situation. But right now it is expected that Jaden, Marcus, and Jeff Driscoll will be the 3 quarterbacks if they carry 3. Now there's obviously that conversation as well. If they only carry 2, Sam Hartman is still expected to be the primary practice squad guy. Not again because Jeff Driscoll has done anything wrong, but because obviously there's more of a long-term upside with Sam Hartman than there is with a guy like Jeff Driscoll.
Yeah, and Hartman not being a draft pick, that makes a big difference on whether or not they would have, because they would have known, hey, we didn't spend a 7th round draft pick or a pick at all to put him on the practice squad and have some team steal him away from us. So, hey, good for him. We'll see if he winds up sticking and nobody claims him or anything like that. Okay, so Eckler, Robinson, and even Rodriguez is a number 3, but especially those top 2 looks like a pretty nice backfield.
Yeah, it looks like a really good backfield. I think B-Rob and Austin Eckler are working really well together. They play well off of each other. And, I think Cliff Kingsbury has every intention in the world of using them to take as much pressure off of Jaden Daniels as possible. I actually did a study of Cliff Kingsbury's offensive play calling not that long ago, and I don't have the data in front of me anymore. But when I collected, I was actually very surprised in games where Cliff Kingsbury's offenses were trailing by less than 6 or ahead by less than 6. They ran the ball more than almost anybody in the league. Like they were like we're talking top 10, top 5 run numbers. Where the pass heavy really came in is when they were down, obviously by like 10 or more, things like that. And I think any offensive coordinator is going to get a little bit pass happy when that type of situation comes up. So really kind of look for this team. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it's less than 2 touchdowns. If we're down by less than 2 touchdowns, continue to run the ball, continue to use those running backs, continue to use the screens, all those things. Let's continue to protect our quarterback through our play calling as much as we're trying to do it over here. Now, the closer you get to crunch time, you need the bigger plays. You don't have a choice. But, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team down, say, 10 in the second quarter, and they still come out with, 2 runs to start a drive, something like that, because you're not going to rush to failure, so to speak. Now, behind those two, actually, it's Jeremy McNichols, the veteran running back who came from San Francisco during the offseason. Honestly, just in his play on the practice field and in preseason, he's clearing away the third best running back on this team. Chris Rodriguez has slipped down to that number 4 spot. Honestly, might even slip behind Michael Wiley, the rookie out of USC. He's done really, really well in his opportunities as well. And this preseason game is going to tell a lot. It's painful for me to say because I'm a big Chris Rodriguez guy, but honestly, he's just been outplayed this training camp and practice by both McNichols and even Michael Wiley. So even looking at like a practice squad spot, I don't know if they're going to keep 2 backs on the practice squad. If they don't, Chris Rodriguez might actually be the odd man out in this situation.
And I think this is a really good situation for Eckler because this is the situation. Even though he put up pretty decent numbers on his own as a number 1, his best role is this is the role that really fits him better. So because the wear and tear, especially for his body, just as you could see, it just wasn't good for him. And now he's getting a little bit older. So yeah, that's why I said this looks like an exciting young backfield that looks like it's going to work out perfectly. And I'm a little bit surprised about McNichols, but not so much that maybe it's just taking him a little bit of time, find the right scheme. He was a big time Boise State running back. And sometimes that's all it takes is just to find the right fit. So good for him. All right. Now you mentioned Ertz. And this guy is pretty old, but you hit the key word, and that's leader. And I'm sure that is the number 1 reason he's on this team. And to give, of course, we know how tough the tight end position is for rookies like Ben Sinnott to understand, to grasp, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm sure he's the perfect bridge tight end for a kid like Sinnott. But watching the Jet games, since I'm a Jet fan, Sinnott made a couple of nice plays. How's the team feeling about how he's done this preseason, this training camp?
Yeah, Ben Sinnott's been great. Like he's been an awesome guy there. I do think he's actually still tight end number 3. But I kind of predicted heading into training camp, I thought he'd be tight end 2 by the end of the preseason. But John Bates, their number 2 tight end, has actually shown a lot of growth as well. He came in as a solid blocker with decent to good receiving ability. But he's grown every year as a receiver and probably even gotten better as a blocker. So John Bates, I do think is still firmly that number 2 tight end. He's not as explosive as a lot of tight ends or whatever, but he's going to give you consistent play every rep he's out there, right? And exactly what you're getting out of John Bates. I think it's very valuable. Zach Ertz, I'll tell you what, man, like after watching Logan Thomas, and I'm a big Logan Thomas guy, he's a cool dude too. He's older, He was run down. You could tell his body just kind of wasn't with it anymore. So when they brought Zach Ertz in, I was kind of in the boat of, okay, this is an older veteran leader. Like that's pretty much all he's going to be. He's not going to have much in the gas tank. He looks young. Like this dude plays young, and he's laying out for balls. He's going up and grabbing them. He's punting, balls out of the end zone as a touchdown celebration. Like Zach Ertz looks rejuvenated, and he looks really, really good. Now, can he stay healthy all season long? I don't know, but he has surprised me in training camp with just kind of how almost like a rejuvenation he's experienced here with Washington. So you have 3 really good tight ends with Ben Sinnott obviously having, I think, the most upside long term. And I do, Zach Ertz, even as impressive as he looks this year, he's still a bridge tight end. Like he's too old to be the tight end of the future. It just kind of is what it is. But if that's what you got to rely on this year for your rookie quarterback, you're going to take that 9 times or 10 times out of 10. And then next year, I think Ben Sinnott probably still projects to be that number 1 tight end. John Bates probably sticks around as your number 2, and then the team's going through there to try to find that 3rd and 4th guy because Cole Turner, unfortunately, has not gotten better as a blocker, and actually is kind of in the last couple of weeks has actually regressed as a receiver. So that's really problematic. And if he comes into Sunday night against New England and drops a bunch of passes, I don't know that they actually keep him, to be quite honest with you. I think they want 4 tight ends, but there's a world where Cole Turner plays so poorly that they're like, okay, we're just going to take 3 and we'll maybe keep another running back or something.
So what do you, as we turn to wide receivers, so how many do you think is going to come into play on a game-to-game basis regarding scheme? Because you were talking about taking a look at Kingsbury's the way that he schemes certain plays at certain times, especially in the running game, but also when you take a look at his passing formations and his packages, there's a lot of 4 wide receivers and 1 running back. So
yep.
is there a particular lineup that he likes to use?
So without giving away too much what we see in training camp, that'll get me in trouble. There's gonna be a lot of formations used. I'll just put it that way. Like, you're gonna see him spread it out, but you're also they've got some heavy packages as well. And I think what's important to remember when trying to anticipate what Cliff Kingsbury is going to do is that the Washington Commanders not only hired Cliff Kingsbury, but they also hired Anthony Lynn and they hired Brian Johnson. So these are 2 other guys. Anthony Lynn's got head coaching experience. Yeah. Brian Johnson is also the assistant head coach, and he's got offensive coordinator experience. Granted, didn't go great in Philadelphia his 1 year as an offensive coordinator, but all 3 of these guys essentially come in with a little bit different style of play from each other. And the idea is to blend all those styles of play. We actually just talked to Cliff Kingsbury on Thursday following practice, and he talked about how, kind of merging all the styles of play from all 3 of them has really been beneficial and how important that's been. So, to a certain extent, a zebra never changes his stripes or whatever the saying is, right? So when Cliff Kingsbury's the guy on the mic, like Anthony Lynn is not over there like, hey, Cliff, we should do this. And Brian's not saying, hey, we should do this. No, on game day, it's Cliff. So Cliff's tendencies are going to be Cliff's tendencies, but the playbook is going to have a lot more options for him to be able to use. And, those other guys are also going to be in his ear a little bit as well. So, I think there's going to be a nice little blend. And I think the cool thing is you might have a game where like, all right, that's a Cliff Kingsbury game. But you might also have a game you're like, that kind of looks more like an Anthony Lynn type of game. And I think that's really the cool part of having so many different minds, but all of them understanding that Cliff is ultimately the one who sends the marching orders.
And that's the way it should be. I mean, you wind up getting pigeonholed as a coordinator, and that's not good. So, and Kingsbury should know. I mean, he did play for Belichick, so I'm sure he has some idea of how you need to differentiate your game plan as often as possible to not be so predictable. So let's take a look at that receiving core. So now De'Ami Brown is the interesting one. And of course, McCaffrey being a 3rd-round draft pick, we would expect that his time is coming. But De'Ami Brown there was so much potential there that at this point is just not blossomed. Is there something different with this coaching staff? Is it possible now that De'Ami Brown can actually be a part of this offense?
I think there's something different with De'Ami, and it kind of goes back to that 41, 42-yarder. I can't remember if it was 41 or 42, but against the New York Jets. I broke down that play extensively, and coming from his release and to the point where he catches the ball, there's really 4 points of manipulation there. And I talked to De'Ami about this a couple of days after the game was over. And the first point of manipulation is his speed release, right? He comes off a speed release to the right side, outside shoulder of the defensive back, immediately wins on the outside. But the defensive back gains a little bit of ground, actually starts pushing De'Ami more towards the boundary, which when you're running that, outer third route, you don't want to give up any space to the outer boundary because that's where the quarterback needs to put the ball. So what De'Ami does, he actually hits him with a little bit of a jab step inside, forces that corner to give up ground to the inside. De'Ami eats it, and then he also takes his stem at a little bit of an angle. It's a very slight angle inside towards the middle of the field, but while he's doing that, he's pushing his defender inside, all the while understanding that that ball is going to come over his outside shoulder. So when the ball comes down, De'Ami uses late hands, gets them outside, and the defensive back is actually on his hip. Like the DB is actually, in a lot of ways, considered to be in position, but because of all the things De'Ami did up to that point, he reaches out to grab that ball, and the DB just doesn't. I mean, unless he's got like 7-foot long arms, like it's just not going to happen. You know what I mean? And that's the cerebral part of playing a receiver that De'Ami Brown has really been missing up until this year. And now, and again, like I said, I talked to him about that, and the entire time we're talking about, like, he's just got this big old grin on his face. and you can just see him kind of recounting everything that he did. And it was actually funny because while we're conversing about it, he actually like steps next to me. He's like, yeah, so, you know, you're the DB and we're doing this. And like, he's just enjoying playing the game from a cerebral standpoint because, you know, we got to remember a lot of these guys, they're studs in high school, they're studs in college, and they're studs just because they're studs. But then they get to the NFL, and now everybody's athletic. Everybody's a stud. Everybody's an elite athlete. You've got to find better ways to beat these guys, you know, because you're not just going to run downfield past a defender, even a second or a third string defender in the NFL. And De'Ami Brown is kind of starting to show those types of signs, and that's why he's starting to make some of the plays that he's making.
And does this depth chart look like the way it will look like on opening day? McCaffrey is being a rookie. Do you think he's just going to come along a little slowly? They're going to work him into the rotation slowly, or has he started to give the coaching staff a little bit of confidence that maybe they can play him a little earlier?
Yeah, I mean, Luke is definitely looking solid. I think the important thing to remember with Luke is he's still a relatively new wide receiver, right? He just started playing wide receiver Rice not that long ago. So he's fairly new to the position still. But again, he's another one I talked to about like the dynamics of like releases into stems and the breaks and how you manipulate defenders and everything like that. And the great thing about Luke McCaffrey is super, super smart. And he's starting to demonstrate a lot of that on the practice field as well. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Terry McLaurin is obviously clearly your number one. I think De'Ami Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus are your 2 and your 3. You know, OZ, Olamide Zaccheaus is probably going to line up in the slot. De'Ami's not really a slot guy. But then Luke McCaffrey, you know, he's a big slot, but he's also worked on the outside as well. The Commanders are going to use him everywhere. And I do think Jamison Crowder, you know, for one, he's kind of that smaller, quicker, short area slot receiver, but also the punt return specialist. So I think those are your 5 that to me are just kind of slam dunks. After that, the question is it going to be Bryson Tremaine, who's 6'4", the tallest dude on the roster outside of Martavis Bryant, who just just got here. But Bryson Tremaine has been making plays all through training camp, and not just against the Commanders defense, but he made plays against the Jets defense, against the Dolphins defense in those practices. The problem is he didn't make any at least any splash plays, right, against the Jets or the Dolphins in the games, and that obviously is more important than just in practices. So again, this Sunday he's going to get extended playing time. Would really love to see him go up and moss somebody against the New England Patriots, or lay out, you know, over the seam and make a really big play for his team, because he's been doing it so often in practice. And we're telling Commanders fans about it, but they haven't seen it themselves. So it's kind of hard to believe things when you don't see them. Yeah. And I think if Bryson can do that, he secures that 6th spot. Behind him, I think, you know, Mitchell Tinsley could have a shot. Marcus Rosemary-Jackson could have a shot. Martavis Bryant is a Dan Quinn guy, so maybe he has a shot. But I really think that's Bryson Tremaine's job to go take. He's just got to go out there and get it, or else it's going to go to someone else.
Yeah, that's why I learned a long time ago that because the exact opposite, when you watch these preseason games and you see these players have these like big games, especially like the last preseason game, and you know they're battling for a roster spot, and then you look at the cuts and, well, yeah, that guy was cut. Anyway, how did that guy get cut? He had this like great preseason. He had this great preseason game, but in some ways, and again, every coaching staff is different. Every player and prospect is looked at different, but sometimes, hey, man, it matters more of what you're not seeing in these practices than what you happen to see. Whereas there are opportunities, as you said, where it does matter what happens in the games to some of these players, because the spotlight's on. We know what you could do in practice, but can you do it when the spotlight's on? So there are different ways to look at it as a fan. But, that's why preseason can be very, very confusing to fans. So
it's tricky. It is tricky because I've also talked to GMs and coaches, in the past, not necessarily from Washington, but just having conversations with football people, and a lot of times what will happen is like a starter will sit out a preseason game and this unknown player is getting those first team reps. Be like, oh man, like this UDFA is getting first team reps and he must be doing great. And I've talked to people, it's like, well, no, the reality is we're taking a guy from the bottom of the position group, putting him with the first team because we don't want to mess up the second unit. We want the second unit to run as the second unit. So if we move our second unit guy up, now our second unit is messed up. Now our third unit is messed up. So instead we take the bottom guy, put him with the first team. And what ends up happening, everybody says, this guy's getting first team reps. Well, yeah, but not because of the reason you think he is. And again, it could be the reason you think it is. Like, so you never truly know, right? So that's kind of the tricky part, because there's a linebacker in Washington, Michael Walker, who, when Bobby Wagner is getting a vet day of practice, or Bobby Wagner is not playing the preseason game, he's getting all the first team reps. Like Jordan McGee got injured, so he's been out. Jordan McGee was getting those reps beforehand, and everybody kind of understands like Jordan McGee earned those reps. But now with Jordan McGee injured and Bobby Wagner said, now it's actually Michael Walker getting those reps. Now the question is, okay, is this a bottom of the roster thing where we're bringing up Michael Walker, or is he legit earning those spots? What makes you think he's legit earning those reps is because when the second team defense comes in, Michael Walker is still there. So Michael Walker is replacing Bobby Wagner in the first team defense, and then he's getting the second team reps as well in the same position. So that gives you a little bit more evidence to say Michael Walker is actually doing really well. But in reality, nobody's really talking about Michael Walker in Washington Commanders training camp, and he might make this active roster given the signs. And a lot of fans are going to be looking at us, right? Me, and saying, bro, this dude made the 53. You didn't even talk about him. And honestly, if that happens, I mean, I'm going to talk about him in my 53-man roster projection, because if that happens, I'm going to have to tell people, like, for the last 5 weeks, I didn't really talk about the dude, and here he is. Like, I owe you an apology for that, because that's something I should have caught earlier.
And he was with Quinn, right? Because he was in Atlanta.
He came from Pittsburgh. So he came from Pittsburgh. Before that, I think he might have been in Atlanta. There is a connection there. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is a connection there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember because he went to Fresno, and I believe he was drafted by Atlanta. I think he was like a 5th rounder or something like that. But it's nice to see, again, same situation. You got to hook up with the right team and the right scheme, and maybe he's found a home. One more thing on the offensive line. So I see Coleman there as the starting left tackle, even though he was just a 3rd-round draft pick. Is that the case? Is he coming along that well that he's going to start on opening day?
Yeah, I mean, he honestly hasn't been able to practice consistently or play. I mean, he was injured before the Jets joint practice, you know what I mean? But by that time, he had kind of taken over that first team left tackle spot, and he suffered a pec injury. I think it was his left. I want to say it was his left pec. Suffered a left pec injury, not like a tear or anything, but more so just kind of a strain or whatever. Again, they're not being specific because they don't have to be specific. But since then, he actually just got back to individual drills this week. He was able to do padded individual drills on Thursday, so that's a great sign. I don't expect him to play Sunday night. And actually, Dan Quinn was asked about him and says, he was getting the first team reps. He was that starter on the depth chart at left tackle when the Washington Commanders released their unofficial depth chart. And but it was like, do you need to see him in the preseason to fully trust him when the regular season starts? And Dan Quinn very clearly said, and in fact, this is what he said, is there's a difference between need and want. Do we need to? No. Do we want to? Yes. But if it's not smart to put him in there with the first team offensive line through the preseason, we're not going to do it. We're going to save him for the regular season. So yeah, Brandon Coleman's your starting left tackle whenever he's healthy enough to play again. And it looks like he's trending that way, given that he was able to do padded individuals this week.
And then how is the new line looking, the new free agent additions?
Better is the best way to put that. So it's really interesting. Like, this offensive line experience has just been kind of crazy. And Bobby Johnson was the offensive line coordinator in New York for the Giants last year, and they were dealing with a lot of injuries, and guys got banged up. And as one guy was coming back, another guy was going down, and it just created all this chaos. And really, he's got to be like pulling his hair out. Not that he has much to pull out, but he's got to be like sitting back saying, like, what do I do to deserve this? Because same thing. We have yet to see the Washington Commanders starting 5 offensive linemen. Like, we know who they are, right? Tyler Biadasz is the center, Nick Allegretti, Sam Cosmi your guards, Brandon Coleman and Andrew Wiley are your tackles. We have yet to see those 5 line up together once. It has just not happened all training camp, because when Brandon Coleman was making his rise up to be that starting left tackle, Andrew Wiley was having to sit out the team reps because he had some tightness. We never got an exact location where that tightness was, but he was dealing with tightness. By the time Wiley was able to come back for that Dolphins practice and Dolphins game, from his tightness, Brandon Coleman had gone down. So we have never seen it. Now, what we have seen is that interior line. And I will say, Nick Allegretti looks like a backup guard who's getting an opportunity to be a starter. That's not a shot. That's not an insult. There's some reps where you're like, yeah, buddy, go get them, and that's why you're here. And there's some reps where you're going, okay, that's why you were back up in Kansas City. Like, it just kind of is what it is, and the coaching staff is going to need to just kind of hone him in. There's a specific example last week against the Miami Dolphins where he and Tyler Biadasz are supposed to be combo blocking the right defensive tackle for Miami. And once they combo block him, the guard is supposed to get up to the next level and get that defender. Now, it's a read option. Jaden Daniels ends up keeping the ball. But if he hands off that ball to Austin Eckler, what's going to end up happening is he's going to get crushed in the B gap. The reason he's going to get crushed in the B gap is because that defensive tackle actually went to the opposite side, A gap, but Nick Allegretti, so focused on getting his combo block, overreached like a MFer. You know what I mean? Like, when they went to the tape room, I promise you, Nick was like, oh, I can't believe I did that. And he's so off balance that when he tries to get to the second level, that linebacker just ran right by him and would have just cleaned Austin Eckler if he had the ball. So that's a rep where you kind of say, okay, that's why you're a backup on a Super Bowl team. But again, that's fixable. You just tell Nick, like, hey, dude, listen, if you got to take more than a 30-inch step to reach that combo block, just forget it. You don't need to worry about it. Just get to your second level assignment. And Nick is going to do that kind of thing. But, they're looking better. When we saw the Jets, it was Trent Scott and it was Chris Paul in there at the tackle positions. Not even your second and third, or your second and third tackles, or your third and fourth tackles. It was actually your fourth and fifth tackles that were in there against the Jets, and it showed. It was bad. You get to Miami, you get Andrew Wiley back, you get Cornelius Lucas, who's your backup, your swing tackle, right? Your backup left tackle, and it looked much better. So when you remember that Brandon Coleman is even better than Cornelius Lucas is, the potential there. You don't want to get too excited, right? But the potential there is this could actually be a very solid offensive line.
Stromberg and Daniels, part of the other staff, but they were, middle round draft picks. Have they looked? Nope. They're not looked apart.
I mean, Ricky Stromberg has just kind of been solid as a backup. Braden Daniels has been bounced around. He's been playing tackle. He's been playing guard. I think they're kind of trying to figure out where he's going to go. On my 53-man roster projection, I do have Ricky making it because I've got them keeping 10 offensive linemen, and the 10 that you have listed here are the 10 that I have them keeping. Braden Daniels, I think, is probably headed to the practice squad. He hasn't done terrible, right? It's nothing he's doing bad. He's just not doing better than anybody else.
Yeah, that's not what you would be hoping for. But then again, this is what you see all the time when new staff comes in. Okay, let's go to defense. And on the defensive side, bunch of rookies here. Let's talk about Newton, the top rookie, and Sanderson, of course, also a round 2 kid. But Newton, is he looking the part? Is he getting? Is he a guy now that looks like he is going to be a really good pickup for them?
I mean, we've only got 2 practices with him. Like, ultimately, that's all we've gotten out of him. Those 2 practices look really good. Like, that's the best I can tell you. But unfortunately, he suffered a soft tissue issue as well in his foot. So it's the same foot that he had surgically repaired after the draft, but it is not related to that injury, is what Dan Quinn said. So it's not a setback. It's a different injury, which could actually be worse or better. I don't know if that makes anybody feel better. The good news is today at practice on Friday, he was actually running around like he was doing rehab, and he was running. So that's good news, right? The point is to kind of get him ready for the regular season. So we'll see if he can be ready for week 1 or how long it's going to take. I kind of have a feeling he might start the regular season on the PUP list, to be quite honest with you, and that's an automatic 4 weeks. But again, the whole point, this is, the Commanders call it a recalibration, we call it a rebuild, whatever you want to call it. The point is to set this team up the best way for the future. So Johnny Newton, from a potential standpoint, yes, he looks the part from a potential standpoint. So keeping him as healthy as possible, I mean, honestly, if they put him on IR, I'll sit here and tell you, like, they don't need to put him on IR, but they're doing it so that his body just has a year to heal and not suffer any setbacks, and then they'll come back next year, and it's all about the future. So, but I do think he'll probably start on the PUP. We'll see if he can come back fast enough. But I think right now I would probably lean towards him starting the season on the PUP list. All
right, and you mentioned McGee. Was he also banged up?
Yeah, Jordan McGee had a meniscus injury. He actually had a procedure done on that injury. I anticipate him starting the season on IR, but on IR with the possibility that he actually does get activated and return during the season. But I think he's going to need time to recover from any knee surgery. You need time, and especially, like I said, a rookie, you're going to want to give him as much time as possible. So I think he's going to start the season on IR.
And Sandra Still, big fan, really being a Michigan fan, love Sandra Still, leader. What a job he did transitioning from receiver to corner. And just felt that he'd be the perfect nickel in the NFL. So how's he looking so far?
Yeah, being an Ohio State fan, I am also a fan of Mike Sandra Still's play, just not for good reasons. But yeah, Mikey is a stud. I mean, he's just, like he's just as ready, pro ready as it comes. I mean, when he got drafted, a lot of people ran and raid. People say he's my, pound for pound best player in the draft, my favorite guy, and everybody's being proven right. Like, this dude, just from the way he does interviews to the way he prepares to the way he practices, the way he plays, he's always around the ball. Joey Jr. just says, he's always around the ball. Now I want to see him grab the ball. So that's the next step. And when you're already talking about a rookie, like a rookie cornerback, right? I don't think a lot of people understand, like, quarterback's the hardest position to transition to from the college game to the NFL game. A lot of people believe cornerback is the next hardest. So Mike Sanders Still not only transitioning from the college game to the pro game, But now he's transitioning so well that they're actually starting to give him perimeter reps. They're actually looking at him as a perimeter corner in certain looks as well. So that's how well he's doing. And now we're not worried about can he stay in phase? Can he read defense? Can he react? It's now we just want to turn him into a ball hawk, right? Like dude hasn't even stepped on the field for a real regular season game yet. And that's where we're at with his development. So it just kind of shows you where he's going. And then every step of the way, like there's no shaking this kid. He's just confident. I actually saw him today giving Jaden Daniels advice, being like, hey, on this look, you did this. When I see you do that, here's what I'm doing. And this is why I got that PBU. And that's amazing. Like this is, you know what I mean? Like this literally rookie to rookie peer mentoring happening on the practice field. So.
Yeah. And as far as Mike's concerned, he's back at college in Michigan and Jaden Daniels is the Michigan quarterback. That's how he's treating it. So that's what he was doing there. And that's why he was just such a great leader. How about the rest of the secondary? Because St. Jude's is just a very hard corner to figure out. If you're not a Washington fan, you hear this, you hear that. It's just, I don't know what to think of the kid from the outside perspective. They also have a second round kid, Martin, who was drafted last year. And Chin, speaking of another enigma, what to think about Jeremy Chin after that great rookie season? Ever since then, nobody's able to figure out what happened to him. So what's the secondary looking like?
The belief with Jeremy Chin is that he was asked to cover a lot more than he should have been asked to cover. And in Washington, he's not going to have that problem. He'll have to cover from time to time, right? But he's going to be used much more in the box. He's going to be that traditional strong safety that, you've seen like old school football and all that stuff. And there's a lot of times where you actually see him drop down in the box as almost kind of that hybrid linebacker safety. And they bring another safety on the field along with Quan Martin. Sometimes it's Percy Butler, sometimes it's Derek Forrest, all that stuff. So that's going to be kind of his role. And he's actually looking really good in that role. He and Quan Martin look like a really good duo back there for the Commanders. Perimeter corner is the question. That's going to be the problem. If there's an Achilles heel on this team, it's going to be that. It's going to be Emmanuel Forbes, Benjamin St-Juste, and even Mike Davis. I'll be honest with you. The Commanders list Mike Davis as their starting cornerback opposite of Benjamin St-Juste, which is what a lot of us assumed would happen. But it's Emmanuel Forbes getting all the first team reps. I asked Dan Quinn about it a couple of weeks ago, and he said it doesn't really matter. It's an unofficial depth chart, but it matters. It absolutely matters. And the problem, though, is while Emmanuel Forbes is getting first-team reps, and he's had some better days lately, but in the early part of the preseason, definitely had some struggles. Benjamin St-Juste has had some struggles. Mike Davis is not necessarily having a bunch of struggles, but he's also not flashing going up against second-team offenses. And if you've got a guy who is going to be your starting cornerback playing against second-team offenses, he should be flashing. He should be making some plays for your defense. So the fact that he's not is actually a little bit troubling. And then behind him, Tariq Castro-Fields, third-year guy out of Penn State, has looked really good at moments, but he's also kind of faded away towards the middle part and late part of training camp. And then behind them, James Pierre is not going to challenge anybody for a real job. Chigozie Anuzium out of Colorado State's an undrafted free agent who he actually just went down with an injury yesterday. I don't think it's a big injury or anything like that. And AJ Woods, he's just another young guy. There's no studs in that perimeter cornerback room, and that's terrifying when you're talking about playing not only in a passing league, but playing in a passing league on a defense run by Joey Jr. that wants to blitz the heck out of everybody, which means you're leaving those perimeter corners on an island a lot of times.
So really the only hope is that Forbes steps up his game. That's the only hope, is that the light comes on and he's a much more consistent player.
Yeah, the light's got to come on and he's got to get a new pair of feet.
Okay. What about Quan Martin, the second round pick from last year? How does he look?
Yeah, Quan looks good, and my concern actually this season is that Quan Martin is going to be seen in a lot of highlight reels chasing down an opposing receiver who's gotten past Emmanuel Forbes or Benjamin St-Juste, and a lot of fans are going to look at that and say, man, Quan Martin is terrible as a free safety. But what people have to understand is when you're a single high free safety in the middle of the field, you got 25 yards to either side of you that you're responsible for in the deep part of the field, and you can't cover all of that. And the idea, and this is, I'm kind of anticipating arguments I'm going to have, but every cornerback, especially when you're manned up and you have only one, there's one safety to help everybody on the field, you understand one thing first and foremost: you can't get beat outside. But when that cornerback gets beat outside, you're now talking about a single high deep safety who not only has to read it, react to it, and again, they're not necessarily breaking for the most time until the quarterback starts to throw the ball and declare where they're going to go with the ball. And if your receiver is on the outside of that perimeter corner, that safety now has to not only cover all that ground, they've actually got to get over the top of all that to help out that corner. It's just not a task you can ask anybody to do consistently. So my concern is that a lot of people are going to see number 20 coming into a frame late on a touchdown pass and not understand that, if that corner pushes that receiver to the inside, Quan Martin is not getting there late. He's actually getting there on time to lay a hit on that receiver or go up for the ball. So it's going to be an indicative that, that these perimeter corners don't get beat on the outside. The problem is they're getting beat on the outside very regularly.
For as much work as this staff has done, that Peters has done, putting this first team together here and all these rookies and free agent moves. And yes, they added Sandra Still, which was awesome, 100%, great move. It just seems a little surprising that they didn't account for at least a new veteran corner. I mean, maybe we'll still see someone. Are you a little bit surprised that this is it? That this is what they're going to go into the season with, that outside corner?
I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't do more to address the perimeter corner position. Yes, and I'm a little bit surprised they haven't done anything since Stephon Gilmore was kind of the most popular name. Now, the fact of the matter is Dan Quinn and Joe Wood Jr. know Stephon Gilmore more than I or you or anybody else out there does. Sure. So if they didn't bring him in, there's a reason for it. I don't know what that reason is, but there is a reason for it. But yeah, I mean, right now you look at this roster and you say, that's probably where your first round draft pick is going to need to go next year is it to a perimeter outside corner that can fit your scheme. So it's, and I'm just hoping, a guy like me is just making too much out of it. And like you said, the light turns on for Emmanuel Benjamin.
We'll see.
And the scheme turns on as well. Look, we have seen a lot of man, a lot of single high in the preseason, but we've seen some other looks in training camp. And that's the important part, is those looks in training camp that we've seen can also be shown in the regular season.
And in the front seven, of course, they've got those two defensive tackles that have been there for a while. They've done their job. Do they have Armstrong kind of kill two birds with one stone, especially with the injury to Sam Williams? So what do you think about the front seven before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I like the front seven. I think Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen are having a lot of fun in this new scheme, and I think they're going to play a good amount of games. That's going to help free up some of these guys. And I think really Frankie Louvu is the guy that I think if this front seven really gets home, and Frankie Louvu is going to make a lot of highlight reels. He plays with his hair on fire, and I think he's going to benefit from this scheme a lot.
And Wagner, another smart move based on his leadership, and that's again, he's still playing good football. He's not the same Wagner, but leadership most of all, right?
Yeah, he's a little bit slower, but B-Wags is still B-Wags. Like he's still that dude. Like he's gonna be a solid piece of this team as long as he stays healthy.
What's your prediction or analysis overall on what kind of a season you think they're going to have? Because I actually think this division might be wide open if the Eagles haven't kind of gotten over what happened last year. And if they're still not with it with their head coach, that this could be a wide open division, and maybe Washington can do what Houston did. There's sort of that talk out there with the quarterbacks and all that kind of stuff and the similarity. So do you think there's a shot for Washington to kind of make a little bit of a surprising move this season?
Right now I've got Washington. I project like 6 to 7 wins. I haven't done a game by game regular season projection yet, but I'm kind of in the ballpark of 6 to 7 wins, which is, again, the way they win those 6 to 7 games can tell you a lot about the path that they're on, I think. But like you said, like, is there a path for them to win the NFC East? I think there's a path, and that path involves the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles continuing to deteriorate from the inside more than they already have. And if that happens, then they can steal a game against each of those teams. Now you're looking at, 8 or 9 wins. If they can sweep the Giants, because they should sweep the Giants, but the Giants have had their number. Daniel Jones has had Washington's number. Now you're looking at 9 or 10 wins. And look, if you get 9 or 10 wins in NFC East with those other two teams melting down, then you could certainly steal the division.
Makes a lot of sense, David. Great job as always. I appreciate it. And again, you got the Daily Commanders podcast, so everybody can check that out for all you Washington Commanders fans out there. And we hope to get an opportunity to talk to you during the season.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Appreciate you.